Welcome back to Suzanne's Craft. In this segment, we're going to look at making some bunting. Bunting is fun to make and it's easy, and it's great when you see it in nurseries. It can be so decorative and colourful as well. It's one very basic pattern, and also do refer to our blog for the pattern. It's just a very simple shape. You can cut out fabrics the same on back and front, or you might like to have different colours. So what we've done, we've cut out two pieces here. We're going to place them right sides together. Again, we'll just pin them in place with a few pins. Our seam allowance on this is going to be, again, 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch seam allowance tends to be the universal seam allowance for all quilters. Though when you're dressmaking, you're looking at 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. So we'll just take our piece over to the machine, pop the foot, press the foot down, and we'll just go around the outside of the shape. Just going down to the edge. Once we get down to the point, lift up our presser foot and turn to come back up the other way. Now I haven't secured off the ends at the top because our bias binding, that's going to hold these pieces in place, will secure off the end for us. So I'll just cut off the tail ends here, turn it through. You might like to get a better point on the end of your piece, cut it off here, turn it through, there we go. You can finger press it, or you can actually take it to the iron, and make sure that you bring out the point. Do that by actually just coming down and poking it through, bringing the point through. Get a nice sharp point. Sometimes you might need to use a pin to pull it through more, and then give it a good press. So we've got some pieces here that we've already turned through and ironed. Now we're going to attach it to the bias binding. As you can see on the end, I've actually created a hook, so it makes it nice and easy for you to hang up. So what we've done is we have, with our bias binding, now as you might recall in a previous segment, I showed you how to make your bias binding, so you might like to make some to match your bunting. So we're just going to pin it in place. Just a few pins to hold it. Now, because we're going through a few thicknesses of fabric, I've actually increased the size of my machine needle. Normally when I'm sewing with my cotton fabrics, I'm sewing with a 70 or an 80. But because I've got a few layers I'm going through, I've actually changed it to a needle size of a 90, which is ideal for sewing thicknesses like jean fabric. So we'll just pin that in place. We'll just do one, but once you see the technique, you know that you'll be able to replicate it for the other pieces as well. So I'll just cut off the tail end here. Just make sure my needle is on a 1/4 inch seam. Pop it under the presser foot. Now you can use binding that matches, or you could use binding of a totally different colour. We're just going to sew along the crease line of the binding. Just hold it in place as we go. Come to the end so we can take it out. And then, to hide all the raw edges, we turn the binding over and bring it down. So as you can see, we've created a nice top edging for it. But of course, my binding would be a lot longer if I was using more pieces. And do remember, you could also trace out letters and applique them onto the bunting as well. So that'd be rather fun to have the child's name embellished on the bunting. So we'll just go along the edge, take our pins out as we come to them. And of course you can use different coloured thread to add more decoration to the piece, or you might like to use matching thread as well. So as you can see how easy it is, and just imagine you can string quite a few of these together and have a nice long piece, which is ideal for decoration throughout the house. So do refer to our blog and have a look at the pattern that we've got available. Welcome back to Suzanne's Craft. Here's a handy tip that you might like to employ when you're cutting your bias binding. As I mentioned with our quilt as you go quilts, the binding we cut on the straight of the grain, but sometimes you need to cut binding that has a little bit of stretch in it, especially when you want to go around circular edges. So as a lot of you will know, the straight grain is either straight down the fabric this way or going across this way. To actually get the cross of the grain, we need to cut across it. So as you can see, I've already cut some bindings here, so we'll just cut some more. I'll line up my ruler, and I'm just wanting to cut an inch binding. Lined it up, and with the rotary cutter, we'll just cut, and we'll just come back here and cut this little bit extra here. So as you can see, as we stretch the fabric, there's a certain amount of give in it. Now to actually create the binding, what we'll do is we'll cut off the slanty edge, and we have a bias binding maker. And this, once you get the knack of it, is really easy to use. What we'll need to do is thread the fabric through our bias maker, and as we thread it through, it curls it and creating the two sides. So as we pull it out, the other side, you can see it turning in on the edges. And what we do, have our iron ready, and as we pull it through, we iron it down and we seal that bias binding. So this is great if you want to make binding that matches the craft item or the garment that you're making. And in no time at all, you've created your own binding with a bit of stretch in it. So for further information, do go to our blog, and it'll give you more information about the different sizes of the bias binding makers.